Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and another CTP login month has come and gone. So I decided to, after 5 months, revisit and update the CTP, the best of CTP ranking. So we're going to go through all 10 of the existing all 11 of the existing CTPs, and I'm going to give you my top 10 picks for them, considering all of the new content since since August of last year, 2020. Most specifically, no. So going over to CTP here, we can see all the CTPs in the game. We are not going to be talking about veteran because nobody has that. There's literally like 50 players in the game that have one of these bad boys. If you want more advice about that, I suggest that you try to track down somebody that has a CTP of veteran and ask them, because I don't have one, so I have no idea what it how it functions. So starting us off, we're just going to jump right into Insight. Now, the Insight CTP is for support type characters. The support type characters are generally almost the same as they've been for the past year, except notably we've seen some characters sort of exit the list or go much lower down on the list because they have other roles to fulfill. So on the old list, I'm not going to show you the new list just yet, but on the old list, I think Valkyrie was number 2. I completely removed her from this list in anticipation of her uniform. Her uniform is going to completely transform her as a character. It's going to make her amazing, probably or guaranteed to be the best combat female for ABX, which also means she's going to be the best for squad battle if you have a combat female requirement. So she's definitely deserving of something much more than a CTP of Insight. Now I'm going to throw the top 10 here. You guys can see we have Colossus, Phyla-Vell 1 and 2. Then we have Phil Coulson, She-Hulk, Taskmaster 3, 4, and 5. White Fox drops all the way to 6th because of her new winter uniform. Otherwise, she'd be higher, but she's very good. And if she gets a tier 3 or an awakening, which then means you can use her in DRX and null, then she would basically drop out of this list because you wouldn't want to give her an Insight. You'd want to give her, well, maybe you'd still want to give her an Insight. But anyways, she could have a lot more value in that sense, right? Then you've got Shuri, Baron Zemo, Cyclops, and Mystique rounding out the list. Now, let's talk about Mystique. Mystique is a very good character, and she sort of fits the profile of what I said, that you don't really want a CTP of Insight on these characters necessarily, but Mystique is one of the only good supports for, basically the only great support for null. So if you're really desperate for more damage output, and if you're not using Mystique, especially if you're pushing high levels, you know, on stage 9 of null, I need Mystique to support Odin, right? I need all my firepower. So her rage is not really doing much there. Sure, I can switch to her and she can do some damage, but Insight's not the worst option. She-Hulk still there as a leadership, and actually, although She-Hulk got a new uniform that makes her look much better, Insight is actually even more valuable for She-Hulk now because you're going to take your Insights off of Valkyrie. Phyla-Vell, still one of the best support characters in the game, especially for your Silver Surfers, your Sentries, your Thors, because of that skill damage, bonus damage. Huge power there. And then Colossus, of course, still the #1 PvP option as a support. Baron Zemo. Cyclops is there for the same reason as Mystique, as a leadership support for null and DRX. And then Baron Zemo is there as the best speed villain leadership for Bullseye, Mystique, and Gwenom, and Doc Ock. So that is the CTP of Insight. Moving along, I actually wanted to make this video a little bit shorter, so I condensed the CTPs of Transcendence and Patience into one CTP list, because they're very, very similar, and they basically do almost the exact same thing. Obviously, the Patience one is a little bit more defensive because it has dodge and attack, whereas the Transcendence has ignore, dodge, and attack. There's also the issue of Transcendence having the reforging. This list and this whole guide does not consider CTP reforging at all for the character ranking, so I'm completely ignoring CTP reforging. Obviously, the CTP of Transcendence is better than Patience if you reforge, but that's not, again, I'm not going to consider that for this list. If you want to go ahead and transcend or reforge your Transcendences and give them to other characters, you can do that. I don't have any experience with that, so that this list does not reflect a reforged Transcendence. It just reflects regular Transcendences and Patiences, which are for summoner type characters. So there's the list right there. You've got Moon Girl, #1, because of her Devil Dinosaur. You've got Pimptron, Morgan Le Fay, Nightcrawler, and Wave. Nightcrawler and Wave are pretty good for mid-level Shadowland stages, so that's why I suggest giving them a CTP of Patience or Transcendence. Again, depends whether you want them to be more offensive or defensive, slightly. Then you've got Kid Kaiju, Clea, Kitty Pryde, Squirrel Girl, and Ultron rounding out the list. Generally speaking, Transcendences and Patiences are not meant for any of your top characters. They're not meant for the absolute worst character, but they are meant for your sort of like bottom 30% of characters, and most often these characters are only going to be used in Shadowland and very low level content. So just don't expect a lot out of them because these CTPs just don't perform very well in most challenging content. Well, in all challenging content. Next up, we have the CTP of Greed. And this CTP is probably the one that I get the most frustration around because I get the most questions from players and I just don't know how many times I've said it, but it begs repeating. The CTP of Greed is not very good. Unfortunately, it just has a very strange function where it rotates between the damage, increased speed and universal types, and then combat and blast. Because it continues to rotate, and because there are no enemies in the game that have two classes, you basically don't have, or types, you basically don't have consistency with this CTP. So Jean Grey is basically the only character that can make this CTP work because she's just so tanky and she's just so strong. After Jean Grey, there honestly isn't a good suggestion. There just really isn't. There are other options, but there aren't any good options. The CTP of Greed is not the best. It's not even the best CTP for Jean Grey. So I just want to make that very clear. The CTP of Greed is a suboptimal choice for any character in the game. It's just not a good CTP. So if you have more than one of them, I've got 3 of them sitting in my inventory doing absolutely nothing. Don't feel bad, okay? You're in the same boat as everybody else. So that's why there is no number 2 for the CTP of Greed. That sort of silhouette is just to indicate that it's not a good CTP and there's not many good characters for it, and there's just not any content for it either. It does not fit either box. But anyways, here's the list, which is mostly unchanged from the last 5 months. You've got Richard Rider, Quicksilver, Apocalypse, Silver Surfer, Deadpool, Wolverine, Captain America, and Ant-Man. Yeah, it's just... yeah, there's not really much to say. Honestly, don't sweat it, right? If you just leave it in your inventory, maybe they'll get reforged, maybe they'll improve the stats, or they'll make this CTP more consistent in the future, but right now the CTP is pretty bad. Speaking of bad CTPs, we have the Egg! The Egg! The one that no one wants to see from the CTP login, the CTP of Refinement. This is basically for characters who have low value, and you're just going to use them as damage sponges and possibly use them for their reflect. So this is going to heal them and keep them alive longer. Of course, Destroyer is number 1 on the list, but like Greed, the Refinement, did I say Regen? The Refinement is not very good for any character. Regeneration, the CTP of Regeneration is better for every single character on this list. So just know that if you're giving one of these characters a Refinement, and again, it's not optimal. It is a suboptimal CTP for every character in the game. However, I'll give you some suggestions. You've got Cull Obsidian because he already has Guard Break immunity. Same thing with Ant-Man and She-Hulk. They have Guard Break immunity. They don't need it again. So that's why they can use this more effectively than other characters. Destroyer, Luke Cage, and Volstagg, and Colossus, and Jessica Jones can reflect. And then Quasar just has a lot of defense. So this just makes her more defensive because she has an HP shield. So max HP just improves that. Again, nothing too spicy. Really not what you're watching the video for. I hope you're not watching it for the refinement suggestions. Up next, we have the CTP of Judgment. Now, this one is a much more popular CTP. This is an elemental CTP that is meant for characters that have a difficult rotation. Either they have really long cooldowns or they have lots of persistent skills, so it's hard to nail it down on one particular skill for a traditional proc. Because the increased damage is active for the full 5 seconds, it's sort of like a mini rage for elemental characters. So take a look at the list here. These are all elemental damage dealing characters. You've got Ghost Rider first, Professor X second. This is basically 2 of the best elemental dealing characters, damage dealing characters in the game, and they have frustrating rotations. They have difficult rotations to land a traditional proc on. Then you've got Luna Snow. She's lost a little bit of value because she doesn't keep up that well against Null. You've got Dormammu, Beta Ray Bill, Storm, Apocalypse, Kid Kaiju, Emma Frost, and Blue Dragon. Now, there are some important things to note here. 1, Dormammu is sometimes better with a Judgment than a Rage because he doesn't have any guaranteed crit rate, so it's actually very difficult for him to trigger the Rage proc. So some players have noticed that they actually get more out of a Judgment than a Rage. Again, I can't confirm this. I haven't confirmed this myself yet. I don't have tier 3 Dormammu, but that's what I've heard, which is very unusual. Secondly, Beta Ray Bill is not best with a Judgment. You can definitely give him a Judgment, and he can definitely still do a lot of damage with a Judgment, but for Beta Ray Bill, for most content, World Boss Null, DRX, Galactus, you're trying to stack all of the damage on the combo because you can cancel so many of Beta Ray Bill's skills, right? You can cancel 5 and 3. and it still creates all that lightning. So you're stacking 5 and 3 into 6. You use the 4 buff, and you stack all that damage. So that's why a damage proc from a CTP of energy, or a damage proc from a regular obelisk, the chain hit damage from an energy, all of that benefits him more. So Judgment is not the best for Beta Ray Bill, but it is still a very good option. Just want you to know that, just to sort of clear that up here. Up next, we have the CTP of Authority. Now, not as bad as Refinement or Greed. Authority is just, it's mostly suboptimal. It's still useful for PvP, but this is almost entirely a PvP centered obelisk. And almost all of the time, but not all of the time, but almost all of the time, a regen would be better, a CTP of Regeneration. However, those are much harder to get. They're much more expensive. So if you have some authorities, you can consider them like a baby version of a Regeneration, which is missing the max HP and the penetration, the shield that you can't penetrate, but it does have the accumulation, so it's not bad. It's a little bit more offensive. So here's the list. You got Silver Surfer, Thanos, Jean Grey, then you've got Sentry, Dormammu, Hulk, Odin, Apocalypse, Doctor Strange, Nimrod. I put Hulk pretty low on the list because he needs the HP, right? His damage is based on HP, survivability, so if he doesn't have HP scaling, it's just sort of, it's worse for him than it might be for other characters. Sentry is honestly could be lower on the list as well because Sentry is just so strong. He doesn't need the authority. He doesn't even need the guard break immunity. You could give him an obelisk, any obelisk, and he can do so well in PvP. So the authority I feel like is kind of wasted on him, but he's still an extremely strong character. So I have to recognize his value overall. But you know, you can basically, you can get a 2-for-1 with Sentry. You can give him a regular damage proc or a rage or an energy, and he can still do PvP 90 or 95% as well as he would with this. So again, I don't recommend it on the top like 3 or 4 picks, but they're there because they're still the best characters for PvP. So that's kind of how it goes. Next up, we've got Destruction. Just a really quick recap on how Destruction works. If your character has a chance to penetrate and it's higher than 30%, it will ignore the Destruction, the CTP of Destruction proc. It doesn't stack together, it just ignores it completely. So generally, you don't want to give this obelisk to characters who have penetration. If you do, and their penetration is more than 30%, then it's basically just a crit damage, guard break immunity, proc obelisk. That's not so bad. That's still a pretty good obelisk, but it's an obelisk. It no longer has a unique property. So here's the list here. You got Captain Marvel, of course, top choice as always, has fallen off heavily for the PvP meta, but there basically just isn't another better choice for Destruction. Again, Destruction is kind of a suboptimal obelisk. It's not the best for PvP, and it's not the best for PvE for any character. So again, when you equip this on a character, you're acknowledging that it's a suboptimal build, at least in my opinion. You've got the 3 Warriors of the Sky, Blue Dragon, Shadow Shell, and Sunbird. Pretty self-explanatory. You put them together in Alliance Conquest or King of the Hill, and they just all have penetration, and they all just shatter face. They just smash face. You've got Yelena, who surprisingly does not have penetration on her kit at all. Spider-Man, Ant-Man, and Captain America, who also don't have penetration. Red Skull, who doesn't have penetration. The only one on this list who has penetration is Deadpool. However, it's still a guard break, crit damage obelisk. So if you don't have an energy for him and you want Holiday Lady Deadpool to still have some punch, Destruction is not the worst thing in the world. As you know, if you can't roll an obelisk with crit damage and a proc, it's something. So yeah, not optimal, but it's something. Up next, we've got Energy. And again, I'm not considering reforged energies, but here we go with the list. Sharon Rogers, still the queen, just because Moonstone can actually do really well with an obelisk. Sharon, I think, needs the chain hit damage more than Moonstone needs it, which is kind of crazy to say. Moonstone's so good. But yeah, that's why Moonstone is second. Then you got Beta Ray Bill, Moon Knight, Sentry. Sentry's just so good, and he's got chain hit damage already. You got Holiday Lady Deadpool, still so amazing. Venom. Black Widow has definitely fallen off for PvP, but I still put her on this list because you can give her an energy. She can do PvP, especially if, you know, like Sentry and Hulk are banned. She's so good to solo, you know, Jean Grey's and Thanos's. And then you can still take her into PvE, you can still take her into Null, and she can do a lot of damage. Then you've got Amadeus Cho to round out the list with Dr. Octopus. Not necessarily the top 10 best options for PvE content. I mean, you could put Odin in here or Black Bolt or stuff like that, but I feel like these characters still play really smoothly with an energy. Odin is better than most of the characters on this list, but he's just such a pain in the ass to play with an energy that I don't feel like it's a good investment, and you may end up feeling frustrated that you equipped it on him and not on a character that can utilize it more effectively, which is kind of what we say about Moon Knight with a rage, but he's on both lists. Second to last, we have the CTP of Regeneration for PvP. This is the #1 PvP CTP in the game. number 1 PvP CTP. Here's the list. Hulk, of course, number 1 for the HP. Just synergize. Silver Surfer, Thanos, Sentry, Jean Grey, Dormammu, Apocalypse, Odin, Doctor Strange. And then I put Molecule Man there at number 10 just sort of to pity him, honestly. Maybe he's 10th. You could honestly put a couple of characters there, but the short list of dominant PvP characters is like 5 or 6. So really the bottom 4 picks could be interchanged with others. Now, here's the thing. I said Sentry was the best PvP character in the game. He is. Why is he not number 1 for regen? Well, he doesn't need the regen. Again, it just goes back to the idea that he just doesn't need the regen to dominate. You can go 70-0 with Sentry with an obelisk, with a proc obelisk. He just doesn't need the Sentry. Obviously, or he doesn't need the regen. Obviously, if you're a huge PvP whale, you're going to give him a regen. You're not going to be referring to this list in that sense anyways. But if you're a huge PvP whale, all of these characters have regen. So it is what it is. But yeah, that's how I rank it. Last but not least, the most popular PvE CTP in the game. That's why I left it for the end. Rage. This CTP is the best PvE CTP for characters. It's basically the best PvE CTP for most characters, besides reforged energies for certain characters. But it's especially good for characters who have frustrating skill rotations. Most notably, the top 2 choices here, Odin and Doctor Strange. They are just so annoying to play. Doctor Strange is basically impossible to play with a regular obelisk. Then you've got Ghost Rider, Luna, who are the top picks for Judgement, so it sort of matches there. You've got Sentry, just because he's so good and he can take advantage of the best of both worlds. Then you've got Moon Knight, Professor X, Carnage, surprisingly there, Mystique, and Star-Lord. Carnage, Mystique, and Star-Lord, you could argue there's a couple of characters that could be there instead of them, but they are all really good, and especially for Null, which is sort of the hot content right now, I feel like they are very good, and Star-Lord especially, he doubles as a leadership, so he has additional value, especially once you get to stage 10, where you can't use female characters. So hopefully this list of the 10 best characters for every single CTP has helped you choose who you are going to equip with a CTP next. If you have any additional questions, you can always hit me up in the comments. You can go on Discord and talk in the community. There's tons of people there, or you can hit me up on Twitter. Hopefully this helps. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.